I'm concerned about the principal theme of the book, and it is highlighted in the preface, that one of our constitutional principles is, apart from justice and equality and other things, is fraternity. Fraternity means bhaichara. Now, it was mentioned in the parliament, in the debates in the Constituent Assembly, but not sufficiently gone into, and it has not taken shape in any of the policies that have been followed by successive governments over time.
The book talks about ideological decadence in politics. How would you explain this term to an average citizen? Do you see this as a global trend or primarily a phenomenon in Indian political culture?
No, it's basically you take your stand on the Constitution and the preamble of the Constitution and then see to what extent it has been implemented. We have talked a great deal about it, but have we implemented all of it? Nobody will accept that.
How would you put it in layman terms? How do you define this phenomenon in terms of layman?
Look, the basic principles are all spelled out on the first page of the Constitution of India. It talks about justice, equality, and it talks about fraternity. Now, fraternity has not been given shape in our laws, in our actual practice. Justice and equality, yes.
Money, power, and elections are a recurring concern in the book. In your assessment, has electoral finance merely distorted democracy, or has it begun to fundamentally replace democratic choice?
Well, you see, anybody who argues that elections can be fought without money, then he's daydreaming. Money is necessary. Anywhere in the world where there are elections, money is required and money is spent. But the question is, where does that money come from, how it is used?
And the transparency aspect that follows it?
You see, where do you get the money from? You can get it from public donation. You can get 10 rupees per person, or 100 rupees per person, or 1,000 rupees per person. That's one side of it. Or the other side of it, the reverse of it, is that some rich person says, don't worry, I will fund your election, provided you do this, this and this for me.
तो कहाँ तक ये मायने एक लोकतंत्र के लिए सही है?
Pardon?
ये कहाँ तक, किस हद तक ये लोकतंत्र के लिए सही
भाई
है?
ये लोकतंत्र में बढ़ता खराब होता गया है. पहले इलेक्शन में कम था, अब बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया है. Huge sums of money are spent, and those huge sums of money come from people who are immensely rich and capable of funding this kind of thing. But they always do it with a purpose. It is never charity, it is always on purpose.
That does bring me to my next question. India introduced electoral bonds as a reform. In hindsight, do you believe such mechanism deepened opacity rather than transparency in political funding?
Well, look, electoral bond by itself may not be a bad thing, but depends on to what extent do you carry it. I mean, I can have a bond and let everybody know that I have taken a bond for 1,000 rupees. But if the fact of my having made bonds for 1,000 rupees and given the bond to X, Y, or Z, that introduces an element of undesirable secrecy.
But do you see this as it is rather making it more opaque now?
Yes, of course it's very opaque. It's become very, very opaque. How do political parties or political leaders spend vast sums of money in elections throughout the country Where does that money come from? Who gives that money? That makes it obvious.
You argue that political discourse is increasingly driven by identity rather than policy. Is this a failure of political leadership, institutions, or voters themselves?
That takes you to my basic point at the start of this discussion, that identity, if it is identified, becomes unavoidable. But as long as you say, you and I are both Indians, then that is one identity. The other identity could be that I come from Kanyakumari, you come from Ladakh. So it depends what kind of identity we are talking about.
But the public discourse, the identity debate that happens in public discourse, how do you make?
Unfortunately, it has become very, very identified, very narrowly identified. I come from region X, I eat this kind of food or that kind of food, or I follow a particular faith. That is where the problem of identity comes in. If the identity is understood in a wide sense, there is no problem with identity. If I am an Indian, I am an Indian, I am not an Indonesian. That identity is acceptable. But if you say that I am an Indian of a certain type, while the other person is an Indonesian of another type, another faith, another food habit, then it's a different thing.
Democratic institutions worldwide are under stress. From your experience as the Vice President and a diplomat, which institutions in India today worries you the most and why?
Well, the institution, I mean political institutions, obviously, but because political institutions are unavoidably linked to social institutions. If you say, you go back to the basic point, why is there, we are all Indians, technically speaking. But are we brothers and sisters? We are not. That's the difference. That is why I say that fraternity is critical to the implementation of the agenda which the Constituent Assembly laid down for people of India.
Could you elaborate a bit more on this subject?
Look, you know the Constitution very well. The first page of the Constitution gives you the principles on which the Constitution was debated and settled. Equality, yes. Justice, yes. And so on and so forth. But also there's one word called fraternity. That is not being implemented. We are not treating fellow Indians as in terms of brotherhood or sisterhood. That's the difference.
Hamid sir, if I may, fraternity time and time has been more of bit ambiguous term when it comes to when we talk about fraternity. How do you exactly describe fraternity and how is it exactly missing from the Indian context?
Every Indian is a brother of another Indian or a sister of another Indian. There is no discrimination to be brought in or practiced because I belong to Kashmir, you belong to Kanyakumari. I belong to this religion, you belong to another religion. My food habits are this, your food habits are different. You see, diversity is built into the very structure of the country. You start from Kanyakumari, from Ladakh and go to Kanyakumari. Do people speak the same language? No. Do they have the same habits? No. Do they have the same faith? No. So we must take that diversity into account. Then it doesn't matter whether I am a Punjabi or a Madrasi, a Bengali or a Maharashtrian. That's the crucial point. That's what is meant by fraternity. You see, there's a difference in the term majority and the term majoritarian. Majority is an arithmetical result. Majoritarian, it has come to be practiced today, means everything in favor of one particular minority and denial of it to other minorities.
And does that worry you, seeing that in...
Well, naturally, because it cuts at the very root of identity. It very cuts the very root of equality. What does equality mean if it not specifically practiced in normal life? Look, revision of roles, like compiling of roles, is a normal process. Just as you carry out the census. Every 10 years there is a census in the country. So you make an enumeration of the inhabitants, village by village, city by city, state by state. But if you do it at a certain speed, at a certain purpose, then is what makes it different. The trouble about this controversy which is going on is this, that on the eve of an election, you suddenly say, I must revise this thing. I may not be there today. I may be a resident of Bihar working in Bombay. How do you count me? That is the difficulty. The controversy is about that. The manner in which it has been undertaken by the Election Commission and the government's consent.
But today, when we talk about all these values, the opposition party has been continuously questioning the role of Election Commission over it, which has seemed to uphold it.
Well, I remember, you were probably too young to remember. I do remember. We used to have an election commissioner by the name of Mr. Session. Now, Mr. Session and many others before him had a very clear approach to the functions of that office. Once you are appointed an election commissioner, your interest lies only in implementing the law as it is. Then it does not matter which region you belong to, which party you belong to.
You have served both as a diplomat and a constitutional authority. Do you think India's foreign policy today is increasingly influenced by domestic political narratives?
Look, if policy is a complete whole. It is not that this is foreign policy, this is external policy. You make policy or you adopt policies which are in the interest of the country. Now, there are times when this is done well. There are times when it is not done well. That's the difference.